and welcome back to my little library. Today's video I want to talk about my journey listening to audiobooks because I for one I'm still not somebody who loves audiobooks, but I still use them quite a bit. And so I think I kind of want to talk about my journey with them, why I listen to them, what I prefer when it comes to audiobooks. Just so maybe that somebody who's wondering if they should start listening to audiobooks can maybe, I don't know, think about it a little bit more based on what my experiences are with audiobooks. So, first things first, I started listening to audiobooks a little bit over a year ago, which isn't that long, to be honest. And I would say I average about 1 to 2 audiobooks per week. And I think that is the first point we have to start, which is the cost of audiobooks. First things first, I think people should be paid fairly for the work that they do, and doing an audiobook is a lot of work. I think we can all agree on that, you know. So I understand why audiobooks cost quite a bit. I think it's fair that they cost quite a bit, but obviously that also means that a lot of people can't listen to that many audiobooks. I think most audiobooks here cost like around 30 euros, so that is quite a bit. For that I can buy nearly 3 paperbacks, depending on the paperback, like 2 to 3 paperbacks. So obviously if you read a lot of books, buying the paperbacks would be a lot cheaper and you would get more for the money. So, why did I start a year ago listening to like 1 to 2 audiobooks a week and I'm not broke from it? Is because I got a library subscription, which I have to be honest, I always had one as a child, but at some point I just didn't go to the library anymore, and it didn't really click with me until like a year ago that getting a library subscription also means that I can get access to a lot of audiobooks, and even if I don't like the audiobook, I didn't have to spend the money to find that out, you know. If you like get your audiobooks from the library, obviously you can like just give them back. Actually, a library subscription in Berlin is quite cheap. I pay 10 euros a year for that. So yeah, that is really not a lot also, but I didn't know that. But a friend of mine told me that actually the company that I'm living in the apartment, they actually, if you take the contract from the apartment to the local library, you actually don't have to pay anything for the library, because yeah, they pay for that, the apartment complex, which I think is quite the nice thing, because I mean 10 euros a year are only 10 euros, but for some families that obviously can make a difference. So yeah, you can even get the library subscription for free. And so yeah, I just listen to the books I can get through my library. But that also means that I'm kind of... I don't have the complete choice what I listen to, because obviously my library only has so many audiobooks, and I listen to them in English if it's an English book, in German if it's a German book. But yeah, that means obviously the selection is even fewer, because I live in Germany, so the normal language is German obviously, and English audiobooks are a lot fewer. But I have to say, I think it's cool that I think we have like 15 different languages that you can get audiobooks in. Obviously not like to the extent that you would get a German audiobook, but we have a lot of choice here when it comes to languages. So I think that's quite cool. But yeah, normally I just choose from the English ones, and also I'm a person who is really spontaneous with what they want to read, so I'm not really one for wait lists with audiobooks, because obviously in the library they only have so many copies, so yeah, sometimes you have to wait. I'm not one for that a lot, and so that also changes the audiobooks that I choose over the last year. A different path to listen to audiobooks is Audible, for example. My partner uses Audible, because he just listens to maybe like 5 audiobooks a year, so not really that many, and for him Audible is a really great choice. He likes using Audible. He pauses it when he has too many like credits to get audiobooks, and then he continues when he used all of those up. But obviously if you use Audible, you only get like 1 audiobook for free per month. And then they have, I think, originals that you can listen to more. And yeah, but for me that personally wouldn't work. It would still be way too expensive to get all of those audiobooks. So yeah, I prefer the library. But yeah, obviously there are different like apps and services where you can get audiobooks for different prices. So you just have to look at what maybe would work for you the best. Over the last year I experimented a lot with different genres of audiobooks. And I have like a rough overview what I like in audiobooks and what I don't like, and how that changes what I can listen to and what I look for when I look for audiobooks. Obviously I can't tell you anything about like romance books or anything like that, like contemporary fiction, stuff like that, that aren't books that I read at all. So obviously I just never look at the audiobooks from those books. So yeah, these are, well, I will mainly talk about non-fiction, true crime, thriller, horror, fantasy and sci-fi, because those are the genres that I definitely read the most, and so obviously my audiobook usage is focused on those, you know. So yeah, I think one of the most important things when it comes to choosing an audiobook is the narrator. I, for one, prefer an older male narrator, I've found out, because I kind of find those darker, like really deep voices to be way more nice to listen to. Though I have to say I'm a little bit sensitive to different noises and voices, which also like obviously changes what I like in audiobooks. For example, I hate when they use music in audiobooks, and I don't like these, well, I've seen them from BBC, I don't know if other like radio stations or TV stations do them, but those like plays that you can listen to, which are often like a lot shorter than the books and have a lot of sound effects and a big cast. I absolutely despise those. I cannot listen to them. For me it's way too chaotic, it's too many different noises. I definitely prefer one narrator, maybe two, one for like the women, one for the men in the book. That works as well, but if you go over that amount of people, I cannot listen to it. I will definitely skip it, give it back, if I didn't realize that before. But yeah, and then if I have one narrator, I vastly prefer deep voices and people who generally speak slow, and then I speed up the audiobook. Anyways, I listen to like 1.5 to 1.75. It's normally the speed at which I listen to. And I feel like that works a lot better with darker, deeper voices that talk relatively slow anyways. So that is a preference. Obviously everybody will have a different preference, but I found for myself that I find a lot of women's voices too high to listen to for such a long time. And so yeah, obviously we will all have like a different preference when it comes to that, but yeah, obviously that really dictates my choices in audiobooks, because if I start one and the person says like 3 sentences and I'm already like, oh no, that's gonna get on my nerves in a half hour, I obviously will give that also back. So yeah, a few of my, well, my absolute favorite audiobook to listen to is the Lord of the Rings, Where Andy Serkis. I'm gonna put the name here. I don't know how to pronounce his last name really. But yeah, he's the actor who plays Gollum in the movies, and he has narrated all 3 books. And that is, voice-wise, my absolute favorite to listen to. A different one is I Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. I'm gonna put the name of the speaker of the audiobook here because I don't know it on the top of my head. But yeah, that voice, fantastic. And as you will see, I think it's a woman who narrates that book, so there are definitely like outliers obviously, but yeah, that is one I absolutely love to listen to. And another one that worked really well for me were Bad Blood which the narrator is this one, and A Taste for Poison, which the narrator is this person. Just to give you an idea what kind of voices I like personally when I listen to an audiobook. Also, I personally dislike people with heavy accents. Mostly because I think it's harder to understand, and in an audiobook it's obviously important that you can understand every word, so if the accent is too harsh, it's obviously really hard to listen to. So yeah, for me, well, I love myself an Irish accent or Scottish accent, but other than that I prefer like plain old British English, no accent, or American English, you know, but like no kind of like heavier accent. So yeah, and then let's talk about, well, let's start with the audiobooks I don't like to listen to, or which I found out I just generally don't think work for myself. And so the first ones that come to mind, which is actually quite funny, is fantasy. For me, fantasy really is 50-50. If the fantasy is too long or the cast too vast, if you have the point of view of like 10 different people, I cannot listen to that. At some point I forget who speaks or which like perspective we are listening to at this point, and then I just have to go back again, listen to parts again, and it's just not enjoyable for me personally. So yeah, long fantasy. The exception is Lord of the Rings, but I think that is more because obviously I know the story really well, I listen to the audiobooks a lot, I read the books a lot, so yeah, obviously that will make a difference, but generally I tried reading different fantasy and it never worked out. So yeah, for fantasy I will have to go with physical reading. Then there is an author, but I think that goes for all of like the fiction of this kind, and that is Kurt Vonnegut. I listened to one of his books and it was just so confusing, just because I think the book is written that way. Like I'm sorry that I'm wobbling so much because I'm sitting on the floor and it's hurting me, but the lighting was better in this spot. So yeah, no, but Kurt Vonnegut, I think he is like, he does like this really weird stories where you need to like pay attention a lot of the time. Like it's really like a chore to listen to that because you have to focus on it, and for me personally, audiobooks are a lot like for relaxing and like doing housework, or you know, if I'm already in bed and I don't want to turn the light on, stuff like that. So I don't want to have to like be too, well, I don't want to have to be too focused on the audiobook. Yeah, so I found out the books by Kurt Vonnegut just don't work for me, but yet obviously all other books that are in like a similar format also wouldn't work for me. And then the last I found out that doesn't work for me are horror books. I listened to a few horror short story collections and then like a handful maybe of horror books. What I think is the problem that sometimes they work with audio cues like you know, music, stuff like that, which doesn't work for me because I don't like it. And then I always think, for me, listening to a horror book makes it less scary, and obviously I want to be scared if I read a horror book. So yeah, sadly that doesn't work for me because I'm just not scared if there's someone, like one voice, reading all of it off for me, and yeah, that doesn't seem to work. I prefer reading my horror physically. Yeah, instead of listening to it, to be honest. And now, what are the audiobooks that I listen to the most, and what genres do I prefer the most when it comes to audiobooks? And I think the first one is true crime. As I said, I Begun in the Dark, one of my absolute favorite audiobooks to listen to. But I listen also to Bad Blood, for example, and a few different ones. Mindhunter, for example, I also listened to, and then the second book I also listened to the audiobook, like the second one from the Mindhunter series. Those work really well for me, because obviously as someone talking about his his experiences, and I don't want to have too much of a picture in my head about what happened to the people. So that works well for me in like audiobook form, because I'm much more like I think much heavier about it if I read it in physical form. So yeah, having like a little bit of like a barrier between me and the audiobook, you know, and the topics of the books kind of works in audiobook form. And so yeah, that is definitely something I really like to do, just like put on a true crime book. It doesn't even matter if I know it already. They just, you know, if I want to clean my house, I like to listen to I'll Be Gone in the Dark. I don't know, it just works really well for me. And then in the wake of that is generally non-fiction. Works for me really, really well while listening to it. Obviously there are exceptions. I had like, well, one that was like a short history of nearly everything by Bill Bryson that I didn't think worked too well in an audiobook form, but generally I think non-fiction works really well for me to listen to. I can't even really tell you why, but A Taste for Poison, for example, was really great. Oh, which one did I listen to as well? Without Conscience worked really, really well for me, a book about psychology and psychopath. Then we have The Unseen Body, also a medical non-fiction book, really, really interesting. So yeah, I prefer if I read like non-fiction where somebody talks a lot about their own experiences, mixed in with a lot of science. That works really well for me in audiobook form. And actually, I really dislike reading non-fiction physically. I don't know why. I think I just lose interest really easily if I read it physically, because obviously the language is a lot drier than if you read a fiction book. And listening to those books kind of works really well, because obviously you don't pick up each and every word, you know, in each and every sentence completely as if you would read it physically, where maybe you like go word to word. I know that some people read really fast and like skip words and stuff, but for me, I'm a slower reader, so yeah, I go word for word. But I think that makes non-fiction more dry for me, and listening to them, having more of a flow in the reading, works really, really well. So yeah, for me, it means that I read a lot more non-fiction than I used to, and on really interesting topics, to be honest. I found out like medical stuff, psychology really interests me. Also nature, like the poisons thing, like chemical stuff, nature stuff. All things I'm really interested in to listen to, and so yeah, I'm using that. And also my library has a lot of non-fiction and audiobooks, so that works out great. Also then, the last genre of book that I like to listen to are thrillers. I listen to Black Crouch Upgrade, for example, but also like just like Kathy Rice, the Temperance Brandon series, works really well for me. Yeah, and stuff like that definitely does work great. It can't be like too complex of a thriller. It needs to be like one of like a more chill, not too many plot twists, you know, that you can like follow the story in by listening to the audiobook and doing whatever you do while listening to the audiobook. But yeah, in general, I think thrillers work really well because you have a lot of like tension and emotion in thrillers. While reading them, obviously, like there's a lot of action in them. The audiobook narrator is really, really good. He can really convey you the action and the tension in the book in his voice, and that I do love to listen. If you can feel the urgency of the book while listening to the narrator, that works really, really well. So yeah, that is pretty much how I view audiobooks. I have to say, I still don't love audiobooks. For me, reading physically works a lot better, but nonetheless, I have to do chores and stuff, you know. I have to keep my household afloat and yeah, you know, work out, stuff like that. And I can't always physically read, and I think audiobooks are a really, really great tool to read more. If you can't like sit down for like an hour and read physically, maybe you can put an audiobook in. Like, you know, if you feel like you want to work out, you could put an audiobook on for that, you know, and read a lot more. Obviously, you don't have to read more, you know, don't get me wrong on that, but if you have the desire to read more, but you feel like you can't put more time into sitting down and physically reading something, I think starting to listen to audiobooks is really great. For me, it took a little bit to get into them, and I still have a hard time choosing them because I'm bad at choosing audiobooks. I have a lot of books that I give back without having listened to more than 20 minutes, just because yeah, I have a hard time choosing them, and it takes me a lot of time to choose one, to be honest. But yeah, slowly but surely I do like them better. I think it's just an adjustment from like never listening to audiobooks to listening to them a lot, just because it's more easy. It works more for my life at the moment, and so yeah, I'm happy that I have my library and can listen to a lot of them without paying for each and every one of them. Obviously, you want to support an author, buy the audiobooks. You know, what I do is if I really liked an audiobook that I borrowed from my library, I will go back at some point and buy the physical copy of the book, just because I like the book, obviously. So yeah, I think that is also a great way to then make sure you support the author of the book. It's like a short overview of my journey with audiobooks and what I like and don't like about them. Maybe leave me a comment down below what works for you if you do listen to audiobooks. Maybe what are your favorite genres to listen to, or maybe your absolute favorite audiobook narrators. Leave those down below in the comments so we can all check them out. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this like really brief overview of the audiobooks I've read and why. Maybe leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!